Hi, everyone. So here we're going to be talking about social media and social networking sites a little bit more deeply and some of their main characteristics and issues. So let's begin with the popularity and use of social media in the United States. And this is adults, okay? So this is partial information. This is not everything that one could possibly know about use of social media. Just some information. This is a Pew report. You can check it out, Pew uh, report. And I think they publish one every year. I have here 2019, so it's got 2 years behind, but I think things have slightly modified a little bit. And I certainly invite you to see their social media surveys of recent, but I think it's kind of following similar trends. Here's Facebook use. So here we're talking about almost 75% of use. This one here is interesting. This is actually YouTube right here. So they weren't tracking YouTube. And now they're tracking and they see that actually YouTube is one of the most used social media sites in the United States. This one here is Instagram is climbing, and I think it's probably climbed a little bit more over time. This one here, this green, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. So Instagram about, what is this? Maybe 40, about 40, maybe a little bit less, 30% of US adults using it, and so on. You can explore this a little bit more. So certainly widely adopted across adults in the United States. Here's an interesting view of demographic characteristics of users. So this is 3 platforms: Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So the top one here is Facebook, then Instagram, and they kind of follow similar patterns, except LinkedIn changes a little bit. So let's take a look at Facebook. This graph is a little bit weird. I would not have created a graph like this. So a note on data visualization. This gives a sense of a timeline, like, going from lower to higher, but these are all categories. So it's kind of really weird. So for example, this here is a different set of information. So this is total. Now this is women and men and women. So more women use Facebook than men. More women use Instagram than men, but more men use LinkedIn. Now, ages. So ages is right here. So this different kind of information. So ages, I guess as we could expect, people 65 and older use Facebook much less, but at least 50%, about 50% of them are using it. So that's quite high, and certainly less Instagram and LinkedIn, but pretty high, of course, 18 to 29 and 30 to 49 age group. Now here, white, black, Hispanic. So just 3, white, black, Hispanic, looks pretty much identical. Use of Facebook, but Hispanic use Instagram much more. Interesting, huh? I didn't know. I'm not sure why. High school or less, some college. So there's another set of information here. Oh, interesting. So people with less education use these applications less. So applications are used more, certainly LinkedIn. So the more college you have, the more LinkedIn you use, but a little also works for Instagram and to a certain extent Facebook. Urban, suburban, as you can imagine, more urban people, rural people don't usually use LinkedIn or Instagram, but they use Facebook. Okay, so let's take a look at this one here. So this is among the users of each social media site, the percent who use that site with the following frequencies. So for those who use Facebook, 70% use it daily, about 90% use it weekly, and then 100% use, one of those or less often. Snapchat, most use it daily, some week, about 78 or so use it weekly. I'm sorry, yeah, we use it weekly, and about 61 use it daily. Twitter, 70% use it weekly, 40 something percent use it daily, and so on. And let's move a little bit into kind of a theories of what social media and social networking sites are. And here I'm drawing from the early writings of Boyd and Ellison on social network sites. And I think because they were really thoughtful people, I think they really kind of got the same characteristics and properties of social media that persist to this day. Although, of course, we're kind of in the age of so-called metaverse, right? So things are changing a little bit, but I think substantially similar to the ideas early on. So social networking sites are sites where you can construct a public or semi-public profile within a bounded system, right? So meaning your profile can be, it's kind of usually semi-public. It's not entirely public. It's certainly not private. But there are different levels of publicness. Bounded system meaning if your profile is on Facebook, it's not the same, it's not on Twitter, unless you create a Twitter profile and so on. You articulate a list of other users with whom they share a connection. So it can be a follower connection, unidirectional like Twitter, or unidirectional or bidirectional like Facebook. And you can view and traverse their list of connections and those made by others within the system. The nature and nomenclature of these connections may vary from site to site. So some are followers, some are friends, and so on. I think the other part of it is the notion of newsfeed, which they didn't really kind of get and developed, and more related to what's going on nowadays. But that's kind of a relevant one as well, because this is where the algorithm that actually does its work, right? How the Facebook algorithm decides what you're going to see from what all of the content that your network publishes. How are they going to rank and list and put the content there? So that's actually really area for theorization nowadays. Just using the traditional and early definitions here, because they're still in use and they're useful, but also to see how things have changed. So this is one of the very well cited citations of what social media are. Social media employ mobile and web-based technologies to create highly interactive platforms via which individuals and communities share, co-create, discuss, and modify user-generated content. So they have this kind of honeycomb graph here of sharing, the conversations. It's about creating identity. It's about being present, knowing what other people are doing and being there. It's about relationships, about reputation. It's about informing groups and so on. The textbook gives kind of a similar definition. The textbook that we're using, Parsons 2018 Computer Concept. So they write on web social media are online services that facilitate communication. So online means web or internet or both. Facilitate communication and interaction among people who want to share information about their lives, issues, and events using a multimedia mix of text, picture, video, and audio. Now, of course, there are many issues with social media. And here I wanted to explore what some of these are. I have an image here of the documentary that came out last year on the social dilemma, which is, it is more like a drama and it's emphasized, but I think they highlight several issues going on with social media, some of which have become more prominent in the news, even as of the previous weeks and months. So there's a lot of commentary about the social media. There was a lot of commentary, still is, about the social dilemma, a documentary, and how it either really describes the social issues, the psychological issues, the democratic and political issues of social media. But some people say it's kind of like, is this documentary psychological manipulation? It's overly dramatized in a certain way, but I do think there's a lot of truth to it. So we have to be careful not to throw the bath with the baby. As we've seen recently, Facebook knows Instagram is toxic for teen girls. Company documents show there was this individual whistleblower that published research from Facebook itself that have shown how their own research shows that social media create problems especially for teen girls. And then there's this other article that in The Verge that just came out recently, October of this year. But for researchers who study social media, the internal study that sparked the controversy was mostly confirmation of what they already knew, that Instagram makes teen girls feel worse about their bodies and that they blame the platform for anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts. Now, of course, this is not to say that this is all Instagram does, and it does not say, nothing has said that Instagram causes depression on all or 80% or most people using it, but a substantial amount, right? So if your application is creating depression on 20% of the people using it, and you have 100 million people using it, that's 20 million people. That's a lot of people. So that's important to recognize. If you, as the comment, the quote just mentioned, if you had been following the health research on social media, you've already known for a little while the negative effects of Facebook and Instagram use. So here I just have some of these studies highlighted. Use of Facebook is negatively associated with self-reported levels of well-being in a study of 5,208 subjects across 3 years. So the more Facebook you use, usually the worse you feel. Of course, you have to check all of these studies, but these assume some kind of control, right? Controlled for other potential effects of other factors. If you don't control, it's kind of hard. But so you got to look, if you're really interested in this kind of theories and knowledge, you need to examine it more carefully. But this is just a summary of some of the work. Frequent use of social media increases exposure to bullying, reduces sleep and physical exercise, which in turn also creates psychological distress. In a study of 3,826 adolescents, social media and television use was associated with symptoms of depression. So more social media, more depression. Greater social media use was found to be related to increased online harassment, poor sleep, low self-esteem, and poor body image. And this was higher for girls than for boys. There are actually many more studies, and they're usually not positive. They usually relate the information that I'm summarizing here. So I think this is important to note, and also because we have to recognize the way people talk about technologies, the way people present information, and what I like to call the ideology detector. Kind of implement the ideology detector on your own. So as we saw, these definitions of social media were all very positive. Social media create highly interactive platforms, communities to share, co-create, discuss, and modify user-generated content. It's about identity, groups, and reputation and relationships. Even earlier on, these famous, widely used textbooks classify or define social media as online services that facilitate communication and interaction among people who want to share information about their lives. Well, yes, but they also make communication more difficult. They both facilitate communication and they also hamper or make communication difficult, because if you have ever entered in any kind of communication on social media posts, you have learned that it's very difficult to communicate lots of kinds of information. Some are easier, of course, some are harder. So it facilitates and complicates, or facilitates and hampers communication. But where's the definition here? This is what I mean by the ideology detector. Find what is not said, what is not mentioned, but it's still relevant. Facilitates communication and interaction among people who want to share information. Yes, but also people who do not want to share information. So if you don't want to share certain information, social media is going to make it harder for you to stop sharing, because it's all out there. They can put the pictures that they took of you on their social media site. I mean, you may not have any way to stop it. So it facilitates interaction among people who want to share and who do not want to share information. Also, where are all the health issues listed here? I mean, some of these health issues have been coming up, okay, granted, maybe around 2017, 2018, and maybe these people didn't know yet, but I think they were out there it's just the way that people communicate about technologies often kind of hides some consequence or characteristics of these technologies for whatever purposes. I'm not kind of sure, but perhaps once again, ideology stops them from even seeing these issues. But I think nowadays, I think this is going to become more understood, and hopefully we'll see it as part of the definitions, mainstream definitions of these technologies as well.